I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 10,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. I'm Jack Henderson, a 34-year-old man from Brisbane. To the outside world, I've always been the dependable guy, the one who fixes problems, whether it's something broken at work or relationships gone awry. But sometimes, when it comes to the things closest to your heart, you find yourself blind to what's breaking. That's where this story begins. It's about my wife, Sarah, my daughter, Emily, and how a growing distance between us all nearly tore my family apart. It's about the lies we tell ourselves, the fears we bury deep, and the cruel things we say when emotions take control. But it's also a story of redemption and understanding. Let me start from the beginning. When I first met Sarah at a friend's barbecue 3 years ago, I never imagined things would end up like this. She was vibrant, full of life. Her laugh could light up a room. She wasn't just physically beautiful. She had this way of making everyone around her feel important. At the time, I was a single dad raising my then 7-year-old daughter Emily after a tough divorce. My ex-wife Lisa had been a good mother, but our marriage had slowly deteriorated over time. We realized we weren't right for each other, and we ended things as amicably as possible. But raising a daughter on your own is no easy task. I'd get home from a long day of managing construction sites, only to be faced with the challenges of homework, meals, and the emotional needs of a little girl who still didn't fully understand why her parents had split up. So, when Sarah came into my life, it felt like a blessing. Emily took to her immediately. Sarah was patient, kind, and genuinely seemed to love spending time with her. It was one of the reasons I fell for her so quickly. She embraced the idea of being a stepmom wholeheartedly, even though I knew it must have been overwhelming for her at times. The first year of our marriage was as close to perfect as I could have hoped for. Sarah and I were inseparable. We'd spend weekends exploring the coast, finding new cafes to try, and laughing over silly things. Emily fit into this new dynamic easily. She and Sarah would bake together, paint their nails, and plan special days just for them. It seemed like everything was falling into place. Looking back, I realize now that some cracks were already forming beneath the surface even then. I remember little moments where Sarah seemed withdrawn, especially when the conversation turned toward my past with Lisa. She never explicitly said anything, but I could sense a discomfort, a comparison she couldn't shake. I shrugged it off at the time, thinking it was just a normal adjustment period for her. But the truth was, Sarah was already beginning to feel like an outsider in her own marriage, even though I couldn't see it. When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I was over the moon. I had always wanted more children, and the idea of expanding our family was something we had both talked about. We celebrated that night with a romantic dinner, toasting to the future and to the baby we couldn't wait to meet. But that's when things started to shift. Sarah's excitement quickly turned into anxiety. It wasn't immediate. At first, it was subtle. She'd start making decisions about the baby without consulting me, talking endlessly about names, nursery designs, and baby clothes, while barely mentioning my input. I chalked it up to pregnancy hormones. After all, every mum-to-be goes through emotional ups and downs, right? However, her focus began to shift away from our relationship. She was constantly busy with baby-related things, and when she wasn't, she seemed preoccupied with spending time with Emily. And while I initially loved that she was forming such a strong bond with my daughter, it started to feel like I was the third wheel in my own home. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, I found myself increasingly sidelined. She'd plan activities with Emily without telling me, even weekends away that were supposed to be just for the girls. I'd come home after a long day at work to find the two of them giggling in the kitchen, completely ignoring me. They would spend hours together, bonding over things that I wasn't a part of. And the more this happened, the more I felt like I was being edged out of my own family. One night, After Sarah and Emily had spent the entire day at a spa together, I tried to talk to Sarah about how I was feeling. I told her I felt left out, that this was supposed to be our pregnancy, not just hers and Emily's. But she brushed me off, saying I was overreacting, that I didn't understand what it was like to carry a child, and that I should be happy she was so close to Emily. That was the first time I really began to resent the situation. I wasn't just being excluded from the pregnancy. I felt like I was losing my daughter, too. The weeks that followed were a blur of growing tension. Every time I tried to bring up how I was feeling, Sarah either dismissed me or acted like I was being unreasonable. And Emily, being just a child, didn't understand what was going on. She thought everything was perfect, that Sarah was her best friend in the world, and that I was just being grumpy dad. Then, one Sunday afternoon, everything came to a head. Sarah and Emily had gone out again, this time for a full day of shopping and lunch without so much as inviting me. When they came home, bags in hand and laughter filling the air, something inside me snapped. I confronted Sarah in the living room, my voice raised, emotions boiling over. I told her how I felt completely shut out of the pregnancy, how she was spending all her time with Emily and treating me like I didn't exist. I accused her of trying to replace my ex-wife, of trying to be Emily's real mom when she wasn't. The words were harsh, but they spilled out before I could stop them. I guess you'll never be as good as Lisa, huh? That's what this is all about, isn't it? You're trying to live up to her, I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. The room fell into a deafening silence. Sarah's face turned white. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stood frozen, staring at me in disbelief. Emily had already run to her room, scared by the sudden shouting. I immediately regretted what I had said, but it was too late to take it back. The damage was done. It was hours before Sarah said anything. She locked herself in our bedroom, and I sat on the couch, my head in my hands, replaying the argument over and over in my mind. How could I have been so cruel? I had let my frustration get the best of me, and now I was left wondering if I had destroyed everything we had built together. Later that night, Sarah finally came out. Her eyes were red from crying, and she sat down across from me, her hands trembling slightly. "I never wanted it to come to this," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I never wanted you to feel like I was shutting you out, but you don't understand how hard it is for me." I looked at her, confused. This was the first time she had ever opened up about her feelings. "I'm scared, Jack," she continued. "I've always been scared. Scared that I don't fit into this family. Scared that I'm not enough for you or for Emily. Every time I look at her, I'm reminded of Lisa, reminded of the life you had before me. I don't know how to compete with that." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so much time focused on my own feelings of exclusion that I hadn't even considered what Sarah was going through. She wasn't trying to shut me out. She was dealing with her own insecurities, her own fear that she'd never be able to live up to the family I had before her. And instead of talking to me about it, she had buried those feelings, trying to prove herself by getting closer to Emily. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I should have known, but I didn't." Sarah wiped away her tears, her face softening slightly. I didn't know how to tell you," she said. "And the more I tried to be part of your family, the more I felt like I was losing myself." The next few weeks were a delicate balance of rebuilding trust and understanding. We went to counseling together, learning how to communicate in ways we hadn't before. Sarah admitted that she had been too focused on proving herself as a stepmom, and I admitted that I had been too focused on my own frustrations to see what she was going through. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, still moments where the old insecurities resurfaced, but for the first time in months, we were talking, really talking. We started making decisions about the baby together, and Sarah stopped planning activities with Emily behind my back. We made it clear that this was a family and that included all of us, not just Sarah and Emily, but me too. Emily, bless her heart, was resilient through it all. She didn't fully understand the complexities of what had happened, but she knew that things were better now. She saw her dad smiling again, and she saw Sarah and I working together as a team. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. As Sarah's due date approached, we both realized how far we had come. The tension that once clouded our home was replaced by a sense of peace and partnership. We were in this together, and nothing could change that. The day our son Oliver was born, I looked at Sarah holding him in her arms and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude that we had faced our fears and insecurities head-on, gratitude that we had rebuilt our family from the ground up, and gratitude that we had found each other in the first place. Looking back on everything, I realize now how easy it is to let fear and insecurity drive a wedge between people who love each other. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that communication is the key to overcoming those fears. It's not always easy to open up about the things that scare us, but if we don't, those fears will fester and grow, poisoning everything we hold dear. I'm thankful every day that Sarah and I found the strength to talk to each other, to really talk. Our family isn't perfect, but it's ours, and that's all that matters. Sure, let's continue the story, deepening the emotional layers and adding more moments of introspection and growth between the characters. This continuation will further explore the aftermath of Jack's outburst, the progress Sarah and Jack make as a couple, and Emily's role as they rebuild their family. Chapter 9. Picking Up the Pieces. After that night when I said those unforgivable things to Sarah, I thought I had ruined everything. For days, we lived in an uncomfortable silence. It was like we were both waiting for something to break the tension, but neither of us knew how to take the first step. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my own words replaying in my mind. You'll never measure up to Lisa. What kind of husband says something like that? I had let my own insecurities turn me into someone I didn't recognize. But the thing that haunted me the most wasn't the guilt. It was the look in Sarah's eyes that night. The pain. The fear. In that moment, I realized that Sarah had been fighting a battle I didn't even know existed. And instead of helping her, I had added to her burdens. It was Sarah who eventually made the first move. It was a Wednesday night, about a week after our fight. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when she walked into the living room. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me, close enough for me to feel her presence but not touching. After a long, tense silence, she finally spoke. I don't want to keep doing this, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I don't want us to keep hurting each other. I turned to look at her, and for the first time in days, I saw something in her eyes besides pain. There was resolve. She was ready to fix this, even if I wasn't sure how to. I'm sorry, I said, the words coming out in a rush. I'm so sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean any of it, I swear. I know, she replied softly. But it still hurt. I nodded, unable to find the right words to make up for the hurt I had caused. Sarah took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to say what she needed to say. I've been feeling like an outsider in this family for a long time, Jack. I thought that if I could get close to Emily, if I could become her friend, it would make me feel like I belonged. But instead, it just made things worse. I didn't interrupt her. I wanted to hear everything she had to say. I know I've been shutting you out, she continued. It wasn't intentional, but I see it now. I've been so focused on trying to prove myself as a stepmom, as your wife, that I forgot about you. I forgot that this is supposed to be a partnership. The honesty in her voice made my heart ache. Sarah wasn't the only one who had made mistakes. I had been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't seen the ways I had pushed her away. "You don't have to compete with anyone," I said, finally finding my voice. "Lisa is my past. You're my present and my future. I love you, Sarah, and I should have told you that more often." Her eyes softened at my words, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of hope between us. It was fragile, but it was there. The days that followed were a slow but steady process of healing. We didn't try to fix everything at once. Instead, we started small, talking openly about our feelings, making decisions about the baby together, and most importantly, spending time together as a couple. Without Emily, without the looming weight of the pregnancy, just us. I realized that Sarah needed reassurance, not just from me, but from herself. She had been carrying this idea that she wasn't good enough, that she could never measure up to Lisa. It was an invisible competition, one that I hadn't even known was happening. And the more we talked, the more I understood how deeply that insecurity had been affecting her. One night, as we sat on the back porch with a cup of tea each, Sarah finally opened up about her deepest fear. "I guess I just always felt like I was stepping into someone else's shoes," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the gentle evening breeze. "Every time I looked at Emily, I saw Lisa. I saw this perfect image of a family that I wasn't part of. And it scared me, Jack. I didn't want to be the outsider." Her vulnerability hit me hard. I had never considered how my past might affect her. I had always assumed that since Sarah was so good with Emily, everything was fine. But underneath that warmth and care, she had been struggling to find her place in a family that was already established before she came along. "I should have reassured you more," I said, taking her hand. "You're not stepping into anyone's shoes. You're creating your own space in this family. Emily loves you for who you are, not because she's comparing you to Lisa, and I love you for you." Sarah smiled, a small, bittersweet smile that told me she was trying to believe my words. "You're right," she said after a pause. "But it's something I need to work on too. I can't keep comparing myself to Lisa. I need to trust that I belong here." And that's when we made a promise to each other, to trust, to communicate, and to work through our insecurities together. Once we had cleared the air, the pregnancy became something we could both enjoy together. Sarah and I began attending birthing classes, picking out baby names, and discussing how we wanted to raise our child. These were conversations we should have been having from the start, but for the first time, it felt like we were partners in this journey. One of the most memorable moments came when we went to the doctor's office for a routine checkup. I had missed a few of these appointments early on, thanks to work and the distance that had grown between us, but now I was determined not to miss another. The ultrasound technician smiled as she applied the cool gel to Sarah's belly. As the screen flickered to life, we saw our baby for the first time in a way that felt real. There he was, tiny but so full of life, his heart beating steadily as if to remind us that we were on this journey together. "He's so small," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. I had been through this before with Emily, but this time it felt different. It felt like I was seeing the future, our future, unfolding in real time. Sarah squeezed my hand, and I turned to look at her. Her face was glowing with a mix of relief, joy, and something deeper, something that felt like peace. In that moment, I knew that we had turned a corner. We had been through the storm, but now we were finally seeing the light. Through all of this, Emily had remained mostly in the background, her innocent heart shielded from the tension between Sarah and me. But she was more perceptive than I had given her credit for. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked at me with those wide, curious eyes of hers and asked a question I wasn't prepared for. "Dad, are you and Sarah okay now?" I blinked, taken aback by her question. I hadn't realized how much she had picked up on. "We're working on it, sweetheart," I said softly. Sometimes grown-ups have things they need to talk about, and it's not always easy. But we're okay. We love each other, and we love you. That's what matters." Emily nodded, her little mind processing the weight of my words. Then she smiled, a sweet, genuine smile that only a child can give. "I'm glad," she said. "I like it when we're all happy together." That simple statement brought tears to my eyes. Emily, in her innocence, had summed up what Sarah and I had been struggling to realize. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being together, as a family. As Sarah's due date approached, we threw ourselves into preparing for the arrival of our son, Oliver. We painted the nursery together, choosing a soft, calming blue that Sarah insisted would help him sleep better. We assembled the crib, picked out baby clothes, and stocked up on all the essentials. But more than the physical preparations, we were preparing ourselves emotionally for this new chapter. Sarah and I talked about how we wanted to parent Oliver, how we would balance our roles, and how we could ensure that Emily felt included in this new dynamic. One evening, as we sat in the finished nursery, Sarah resting her hand on her round belly, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think Oliver will change things?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, understanding the deeper meaning behind her question. She wasn't just asking about the practicalities of having a newborn. She was asking about us, our relationship, our family. "I think he'll bring us closer," I said honestly. "We've been through a lot, Sarah, but we've come out stronger. Oliver is going to be a part of that. He's going to be part of our story." She smiled at my words, her eyes misting over slightly. "I like that," she whispered. "Our story." The day Oliver was born was one of the most emotional days of my life. The labor was long and exhausting, but Sarah was a warrior through it all. I stood by her side, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement, but truthfully, she didn't need much. She was strong in a way that made me fall in love with her all over again. When Oliver finally arrived, the room was filled with the sounds of new life, his tiny cries echoing in the stillness. I watched as the nurse placed him in Sarah's arms, and the look on her face was one of pure love and awe. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I reached out and touched his tiny hand, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. This was our son, our family. As I looked at Sarah holding Oliver close, I realized that this was what we had been working towards all along. Through all the pain, the miscommunication, the fear, we had arrived at this moment together, stronger than ever. Months later, as I sat on the porch holding Oliver in my arms, watching Emily play in the yard, I reflected on how far we had come. Our family wasn't perfect. We had our struggles, our fears, and our moments of doubt. But we had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience, about choosing each other even when things got hard. Sarah joined me on the porch, her arm slipping around my waist as she leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our children, our family, enjoying the simple joys of life. "We've come a long way," she said softly, breaking the silence. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything we had been through. "Yeah, we have, and we're just getting started." She smiled at that, her eyes filled with a quiet contentment that mirrored my own. No matter what the future held, I knew we could face it together. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this heartfelt story of love, redemption, and the power of communication. Relationships aren't always easy, but they're worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story or have any thoughts, questions, or experiences you'd like to share, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the greatest healing.